everybody, and this is TinyTableGames. Today I'll be playing the second part of my Twilight Struggle Conflict in the Red Sea two-parter. First, I played as the Soviets versus the US and lost to the AI. And today I'll be flipping it around and playing as the US against the Soviet AI. If I called the US AI an Autobot, I guess I should call this one a Decepticon. But anyway, thank you for coming along as I continue to work on playing everything on my game shelf and generally getting myself all caught up, mostly so I can have permission to buy more games and play more games, which I've already done anyway. But anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't, and come along and watch me probably lose to another AI. Alright, welcome back to Twilight Struggle, Red Sea Conflict in the Horn of Africa. As I said, I'm playing as the US side this time, which means I've got this large instruction sheet for the AI on the behalf of the Soviets. I've already mixed up all the cards, and it is time to deal myself out my starting 9 and seeing how we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. As a US player, I also get Romanian autonomy this time, which basically just gives you an extra victory point at the end of the game, or 3 operational points if you need it at some point. You can just play it straight from the table. The only problem is it passes to your opponent if you use it, much like everything else in the Twilight Struggle realm of games. If you do something for yourself, it's going to do something for your opponent. That's just how it goes. All right. Let's see, what did I deal myself? Got the Eritrean Popular Liberation Front, the Strongman of the Sudan. That's interesting. Dhofar Rebellion, well, probably not going to use that right away. Separatists, definitely not going to use that right away. Water Wars, Yemeni President. Where were all these when I was playing as the Russian or the Soviet? I always do that. The Abaddon War, let's see, Somalia invades Ethiopia. Wow, that's powerful. And fortunately, I seem to have the other card that prevents that from happening. So that's cool. So this card is definitely going to get buried in the space race. All right, so what card do I want to use for my starting event? Add 4 U.S. influence in countries adjacent that were U.S. at the start of the round. This is definitely the victorious leader. Is my starting one. So that's going to be mine. Let's see what the Soviet starting event is. Scoring. Huh. Well, I mean, that's legal to do, strangely. So we have to do the Russian one first, so let's do scoring, I guess, because it's a 0, and so you go in order. Huh. Although, actually, I take that back. According to the rules I just checked, scoring cards always go second. So first we'll execute the victorious leader, and then I'll score. Which is a pretty nice break for me right off the bat. Thank you, AI. All right, so add 4 U.S. influence in countries adjacent to countries that were Soviet-controlled at the start of the round. Adding no more than 2 influence per country. All right, so Soviet-controlled is South Yemen, and that's pretty much it. Influence in Somalia, so I got to add it around there. 2 influence per country, 4 total. So I will add 2 influence to Saudi Arabia and start the game in control. Next, I will add 2 to Djibouti, which will start the US in control there as well. And I thank the Soviets for their input. This is removed from the game. Now, Africa scoring. Presence, being defined as if you control anything. The US has 2 presence. The Soviets have 0. So when you have presence, that's just 1 point. So that gives the US 1 victory point for that. Domination is if you have to control both a battlefield conflict country and another regular country, if you will. But obviously that's not the case. Nobody's in the strategic sea lanes. No battleground countries are controlled in Africa, so that's all of 1 point for the US. And that concludes the starting events. This just gets discarded rather than removed from the game. And now it is the Soviets' turn to go. So they will start playing. Let's see, at the start of the game, the Soviet checklist says that, let's see, Russia does not control a flashpoint country. That is true. Or at least 3 countries in Africa. Also true. So we want to play the card if it removes U.S. control of a flashpoint country or changes control. Nope, definitely not going to do that because that is in favor of the U.S. Let's see, coup, if a 4 result would remove all U.S. influence from a flashpoint country. Let's see, the only flashpoint country is currently Ethiopia. Realign, if there's a +2 modifier, nope, otherwise influence. Okay, so in this case, I think using the 2 points for influence is the way to go on behalf of the Soviets, because they can put 1 influence here in Somalia and now control Somalia, which is one of the 2 flashpoint countries, and spread their influence into Kenya and work on controlling one of the battlegrounds. And that'll be their first turn. Now back to the US side. I think the first thing I'm going to do is bury this F5Es delivered in the space program. So it costs 2 ops to do it. I got to discard the card. That's 2 ops operational points, I guess I should formally say, or higher, and then roll the die and hopefully get a 1 to 4, anything but a 5 or 6. Yay! Therefore, remove 1 influence from 1 country after the next headline phase. Okay, well, that's something to remember. And that's it for the US turn, which brings us to the top of round 2 now. And the Soviets, US aid. So they will not be doing that. They will instead be solidifying their influence per that chart. And I think the wisest thing for them to do, if not helpful for me, is to take full control of Kenya. And man, they can't, that Sudan thing's a problem. They're going to get choked out if they don't. So Somalia, they're going to move up into the Sudan for their other point of influence, using their 2 operational points. And now they've got the U.S. surrounded in the Horn of Africa. Well, that's interesting. All right, back to the U.S., bottom of turn 2. Now that I don't have to refer to the rules every 7 seconds, this game should probably go a little faster than the first one, and I appreciate your patience from that. Somalia invades Ethiopia, the Abaddon War. Roll a die and subtract 1 for every Russian or Soviet-controlled country adjacent to Ethiopia, so in this case it would be -2. On a modified roll of 5 or 6, the U.S. gets 2 victory points. So definitely do not do that while Kenya and the Sudan are currently held by the Soviets. That's good to know. So instead, we are going to use this Mid-Wars Water War. Since it affects both, if I use this, it only is just the operation points, which I'm going to use to... But what am I going to do with them? On one hand, I want to strengthen Ethiopia because I know how fast that flips, especially when people start doing coups or realignments. But what's the better way path here? If I do a coup here, I do need to do military operations, and that would give me 2 points of that, and it would lower the DEFCON status. Coup might not pay off, and I don't want to get stuck there like having... Gonna coup in Kenya. That's automatically going to lower the DEFCON status by 1 because it's a battlegrounds area. So to do the coup, as you can see on the side of the board there, you roll your die and subtract double the value in there. In this case, it'd be 4. So let's see, do I get any pluses for that? Not really. Six. Well, I actually might pull it off. Okay, so rolling a 6 with the 2 from the Water Wars operational points is in fact more than twice the value in here, which is great. So 8 minus 4 is 4, so that's enough to knock out both points of Soviet influence in Kenya and drop 2 points of US influence in place and give them control. And it also moves the US up the military operations track by 2, because that's how many points it spent doing it. Okay, that said, now we're on to Soviet turn 3. And they, the Derg. Well, definitely just going to use this as is. Add 2 Soviet influence to Ethiopia. Pretty straightforward, and it's removed from the game. If Ethiopia is USSR controlled, its stability number becomes 3 permanently, but it will not be USSR controlled. Because it's not enough to, I don't think, to exceed the value of what's needed in there plus what's the US has. Let me check. Okay, that is indeed what I had to look up. A country is considered controlled by a player or an Autobot, or in this case a Decepticon, if the player's influence in the country exceeds their opponent's influence in that country by at least the country's stability number. So it was a 2 to 1. So let's see, does that exceed their control by at least the stability number? Actually it does. So it is Soviet controlled now. Well, that sucks for me. Guess I should have moved another influence in there, huh? Bottom of turn 3. Now we got a problem, because if Africa's scoring comes up, the Soviets are pretty much gonna win in the trigger scoring. If a player controls Ethiopia, Somalia, and controls more African countries, they win an automatic victory, which would certainly be the case now. So my priority has to be wresting Ethiopia or Somalia away from them and getting some more countries of my own. Let's see. Well, this will work. The Eritrean Popular Liberation Front. If Ethiopia is Soviet controlled, which it is, gain 1 victory point, which is a weird thing to do, but okay. And add 1 influence to Ethiopia, which will make this a 2 for the US, which will equal the Soviet influence, which means that no one controls it now. So now their auto win condition's gone. And add 1 influence in an adjacent country. And in this case, my adjacent influence is going to go to the Sudan, which will again contest Soviet control. So that one handy little card took care of the problem for this turn. And now we're up to the top of round 4. What are the Soviets up to? The Arab League. Let's see, did they control Egypt? No. Sudan? No. They control only Somalia and Yemen, South Yemen. So that is not helpful to them, but they will use the 2 points. In this case, they will use the 2 points because this is contested and not controlled for spreading influence. They will put 1 here and regain control of Ethiopia. And because they have to exceed the opponent's influence by the base stability number, so in this case that's a 1, pretty easy in Ethiopia. And we'll do the same in Sudan, because it's also contested and not controlled. Otherwise it'd cost 2 operational points to do that. And take control of the Sudan again, which repositions them once again to win if the scoring card comes up, which hopefully it will not. So bottom of turn 4, the US is just that quickly kind of in trouble again. Okay. I think we're going to go with the Separatist card. I'm just burning these cards like crazy. Add sufficient influence in 1 non-battleground country to equal your opponent's influence. That's a handy one. And guess what? We're doing it in Somalia because it's not a battleground, which will contest it. And once again, turn off the auto win condition. Man, things are heating up in Africa. There's not much going on in the Middle East, which is a mistake. Plus the space race just kind of getting ignored right now, but you can't ignore the auto win condition, which is kind of one of the more interesting aspects of this game, actually, I think. Because otherwise you could say, well, I'm just going to develop the Middle East, or I'm just going to focus on the space race and making sure my military operations are this or that. But since you always have to keep coming back to those two and who controls more countries overall in the Horn of Africa, you always have to be aware of that, which just kind of makes it interesting and forces the conflict historically back where it was. So, I mean, it makes sense why they did it that way. All right. So, the Soviets will definitely not be using that, but they will use the 3 points. Now, let's see. In this case, what do they want to do? Realignment only if there's a +2 net realignment modifier for the Soviets. That's nowhere, because otherwise I think realigning in Somalia wouldn't be bad, but the US is going to outweigh them. Coup. Might do a coup in Somalia. Could just add influence because nobody controls it yet. I mean, that would be easier. But I do need the operations points. So, and it will block the US from doing anything else because that'll probably drop it to DEFCON. All right. But the AI or the Decepticon coups, if a 4 result would remove all US influence from a flashpoint. So if I got a 4 plus 3 is 7, minus double that would make it a 5 again. So yep, that would work. So we will be coupping in Somalia. So let's see how it goes. Anchors away, my boys. The Soviets did not pull it off. That makes it a 4, which is equal to that, which is insufficient. So coup in Somalia did not pan out. Sorry, that should be at the top of turn 5. Now the bottom of turn 5. Man. Can't believe I'm playing all these this way. But all right, the strong man of Sudan is getting played. The US adds 1 influence more in the Sudan than the Soviets have in Ethiopia. So I will be adding 4 influence to the Sudan, which is a little ridiculous, but that'll definitely take care of it. And this is removed from the game when it's played. So that brings the US influence in the Sudan up to 5, which reduces, flips who controls it, I should say. It doesn't reduce the Soviet influence. But that feels much better. Now even should Somalia flip, the Soviets do not control 3 or more countries in the Horn of Africa, so they could not trigger the win condition. And Israeli periphery doctrine. Okay, it's once again a US favored one, so the AI will just take the build points or the operational points, and I think in this case we'll try and build up again and place influence. So by adding 1 influence down here in Somalia, which still only costs 1 point because nobody controlled it yet, that gives them control in Somalia. Oh, no, it does not because it's a 2. So we'll have to use both of them to raise it to a 4, and now they control Somalia. Okay. That was the top of turn 6. Now the US turn 6. The Soviets are going to have to do another coup or something. Oh, they did get 2 points for that coup, even though it didn't work, though. It was a military operation. It just stank. When they tried to do a coup in Somalia, 2 rounds ago? Action rounds ago? All right, so from the US perspective, I don't like that they have Somalia and Ethiopia both, but even more than that, I'm going to Oh, yeah. That might be my end of round game. But for the moment, I'm going to take this Yemeni presidential assassinations and use it for the space race. So that's 2 ops. So now I got to get a 1 to 3 to move up for the first photos from the surface of another planet. 1 to 3, please. Nope, doesn't happen. Clearly the space race is faltering. Well, that's disappointing. All right, top of turn 7. What are the Soviets up to? They are Indian Ocean Zone of Peace. Score 2 VPs. All countries are battleground countries for the purposes of coup attempts for the remainder of the turn. That's actually not bad. I think they will execute that. Yeah. That'll give them 2 victory points, which basically reduces the difference back to 0. All countries are battleground countries for the remainder of the turn. So it automatically drops DEFCON if you coup anyone. And finally, the US is going to use, I think, the Abaddon War. Somalia invades Ethiopia. Okay. Roll a die and subtract 1 for every Soviet-controlled country adjacent to Ethiopia. So that would just be, well, nothing, because there is no adjacent one, because weirdly, Somalia is not adjacent to Ethiopia, I guess because of the mountains. I don't actually know that one. That's interesting. I have to see if they comment on that in the rule book under the how the designer was doing it. But, okay, whoop. So, roll a die, subtract 1 on a modified roll of 5 or 6. The U.S. receives 2 victory points and replaces all Soviet influence in Ethiopia with U.S. influence. That would be real nice. This also adds 2 to the U.S. military operation. Okay, so 5 or 6, please. No. No, it is not. All right, well, that would have been really cool. Well, it still adds 2 to the military operations. I don't get the victory points. And strangely, it's not discarded. I mean, it's not removed from the game, it's just discarded. Interesting. All right. That was the end of the first turn of the game. So going into the start of turn 2, the space race purposes, the Decepticon player automatically moves up, so they remove 1 influence. Well, we'll both be removing 1 influence from another country, because they automatically go up 1 on the space race each time. The DEFCON status bounces up once. Fill in the late war cards, because we're already in the late war. One interesting thing about this game is there's way more cards than you have opportunities to use them. At most, you're going to be playing, what, 7, 8, possibly 8 cards. 1 extra for your starting event. So you could go 2 or 3 games without seeing the same card. It might show up in the other guy's hand. But since virtually every card, unless you're playing the AI, who gets to ignore the flavor text or the not so flavorful text, good and bad's going to happen to you every time. So this is clearly a game where the more you know it, and the more you know what cards are coming, the better you're going to be at it, basically. Do I like that? No, I don't. I've never been a fan of, and yes, I'm shuffling the cards, I've never been a fan of knowing, winning by knowing what somebody else's deck of cards is containing. That always bothered me. At least especially with wargame style things, which is why I enjoy dice rolling and so many of the Games Workshop somewhat random products, because things are not as predictable as you would like them to be, especially in wargames. All right, shuffled up. Let's see what we get dealt. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because I still have my 1 card holdout from before, which was the Dhofar Rebellion, which we will definitely not be using for anything except the space race. And what did we get? The Lion Falters? No, that's no good for us. CENTCOM? That's very good. Why are these all upside down? There we go. Kenya joins Rapid Deployment Force. Huh. That's a nice one. I hadn't seen that one before. Famine? Meh, no thanks. Oh, Mideast scoring. That's good to know. Yikes, Mr. Niet. Well, at least it's in my hand and not his. The Albino Stalinist Economics. Used that against myself last time. Didn't care for it. And We Are the World. Huh. If anybody's got a famine marker, get +1 victory point and add 2 influence to a country with a famine marker and remove the famine marker. Oh, well. Now that's a handy combo if you get them both in your hand. Otherwise, I don't really see. Yeah. Otherwise, famine, while a historical fact and unfortunately still a fact, where to go? Of life generally. Yeah. So 2 turns to pull that off, but that's pretty cool. 2 adjacent countries immediately make a coup attempt in one of the countries with the famine marker using the operations value of this card. Famine markers add a +1 modifier to coup attempts. Oh, wow, so it makes it easier to... Well, it makes sense. Everybody's hungry. It destabilizes everything. All right, so that's interesting. And Middle East scoring will be coming up this turn. And, of course, scoring both areas at the end of the game. But we start off with the Soviets. What are they doing for their event? No, they're not going to do that. So what do they do in that case? Let me check the rule book for if the wrong kind of event pops up. Okay, it just says you keep flipping until one that's useful shows up to them. All right, here we go. Soviets airlift Cubans. Remove all U.S. influence from one country in Africa. Ouch. All right, well, where does it make the most sense? I hate to say it, but probably the Sudan. By doing that, it gives them control of the Sudan and puts them in a position to immediately win the game again. Ouch. All right, so what am I going to use? I use the Kenyan Rapid Deployment Force. Add 1 U.S. influence in Kenya and remove 1 Soviet influence in a non-Soviet controlled country. The poor problem is they control everything, so that's almost useless right now. So that's no good. It could drop down CENTCOM, place the CENTCOM marker next to one country. The Soviets may not make a coup or realignment attempts there. It's just the Soviets can't make coup attempts there. That's interesting. So we're going to drop, ironically, CENTCOM in Ethiopia, because of course. And I'll stick this over here on this side as reminders to what in the world the CENTCOM thing means. All right, on to the top of turn 1 action round track. The Soviets are, that's weird, so we'll just use the 1 operational point, and they ignore the text. And they're doing great, so they're going to spread some influence, and they can spread 1 into Egypt. Okay, US. I think it's time for famine, which sounds really terrible. Place famine markers in 2 adjacent countries. So we're going to put famine right where we had CENTCOM, and famine in, well, it's got to be adjacent, and I don't want to do it in Kenya, therefore the Sudan. You immediately make a coup attempt in one of the countries with a famine marker using this operations value of this card. So we're going to do it in Ethiopia, surprise, surprise. The operations value on the card is a 2. Coup attempt, die roll plus the operations value minus double the value in there. Well, we'll see how it goes, but still got to give it a try. And I rolled a 5, so that makes it a 7. And because it's a 7, you remove double the 7 minus double the number, which is in this case 2, so that makes it 5. So that clears out amazingly all Soviet influence in Ethiopia, which is a 3, and adds 2 US influence, which gives them control over Ethiopia. Look at that. That one little chick got, I don't know if you can see that. That one little chick, that's kitty teeth right there. Oh well. That's what happens when you leave your board out too long. Yep. Okay, so the famine goes away. Well, if only it were that simple. So there's still a famine marker in the Sudan. That's good to know. All right, now we're at the top of turn 2. That was a real busy turn 1. Oh, and the military operations reset. Sorry, I forgot about that altogether. All right, so Soviets, what you up to? Stagflation. The U.S. must reveal any scoring cards in the hand. The Soviets may then conduct operations using this card's operations value. If the U.S. revealed a scoring card, one must be played on the next U.S. action round. Interesting. Would you want to do that? I'm not sure why you would ever want to do that. Well, we're going to try it though. Stagflation in effect. The U.S. must reveal any scoring cards in its hand. Aha! You Soviets, you caught me. I have Middle East scoring card in my hand. Let's see. The Soviets may then conduct operations using this card's operational value of 2. If the U.S. revealed a scoring card, it must be played on the next U.S. action round. Okay. So this is a Middle East scoring card. So now that the Soviets know that, they're definitely going to do influence operations, I think. With their 2 points, and they'll add 1 influence in Egypt, since that counts as the Middle East and Africa. And they will add 1 influence in the strategic sea lanes, which is not enough to control it, but it is influence. The U.S. can't really do anything about it, and they're now required on this turn to play the Middle East scoring card. So, both sides score 3 for presence. Well, the U.S. and the Soviets both have presence. So that balances out so the victory point track doesn't change. Domination. Yeah, you have to control more battleground and non-battleground than your opponent, which is not the case. +1 control battleground country in a region. The U.S. controls Saudi, the Soviets control Egypt, so that bounces 2. Strategic sea lanes. If you have more influence, 1 victory point. So after all that, the Soviets get 1 victory point. And more importantly, probably, they burn the U.S.'s turn. Top of round 3. What are the Soviets doing now? Using that was 4 points, because that's amazing. Okay, so influence operations, probably again, since they can't do a coup there. Can they do... Oh, no, can't do realignment there either. Wow, that really is powerful. Okay. In that case, we're going to take over the strategic sea lanes by adding 3 influence there of the 4. And with the other point, put 1 in Madagascar. Yeah, I think that was a good use of the time. All right, so on to the bottom of 3. The U.S. is not going to be doing that. Time for We Are the World. If there are any countries with famine markers, which there are, +1 victory point, which brings us back down to 0 and counters the Soviet victory point that they had. Add 2 influence to a country with a famine marker and remove the famine marker. So we put 2 influence into the Sudan, which means no one controls it and it's just influenced, and the famine marker goes away. Talk about using people as tools. All right, top of turn 4. The Soviets draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. Now we'll just do the 2 points. Control is going pretty good overall. All right, spend both points on influence in Saudi Arabia. Since it costs 2, since the U.S. controls it. But at least that gives them a leg up for being able to get to Yemen and Oman. Unless, of course, it forces the U.S. to do a realignment to knock them out of there. But we'll see. Bottom of 4. Man. Okay, we're going to bury Mr. Niet and attempt to do the space race again, because we're definitely not going to let the Soviets get that. All right, so anyway, 1 to a 3. Come on. There we go. So that gives the U.S. 2 victory points for getting first photos from the moon. And it is the top of turn 5. This game is going very fast. Depending on what cards you have, it really makes a difference. All right. The Soviets will be using those 2 points. What do they need to do? He would score some military ops, and it might kick the U.S. out. So we'll do that. Okay, so coup in the Sudan. It's a 2-point operational value. And got to just beat a 2. Yep, no problem there. So that's a 7 minus the 2 for the Sudan stable number, which is a 5, which is more than enough to clear out all the U.S. influence, which makes this Soviet control and gives them 2 military operations points. Which matters, because if you're not up to wherever it needs to be, by the end of the turn, or the end of the round, you have to give your opponent victory points for that. So now the U.S. is going to have to do a coup. Okay. Nope, not doing that ever. All right, we're going to use the late war, which is just 2 points. And we're not using it as an event, so it doesn't matter if that's not getting taken out. And we are going to go for a coup in where? Egypt. Strategically speaking, that's probably the best place. It's going to be a tough roll because Egypt has a control value of 2. But here we go. Would it be more logical to take it in South Yemen? Yeah, probably. But Egypt it is. So 2 plus 5, a 7, which beats the 4, which is double the control value for Egypt. It automatically increases the DEFCON status, and it bumps the U.S. up 2 points on their military operations scale for the operation value used. So they won't be giving away any points in the end game at this point. So 7 minus the double the value, right? Yeah, double the value. 7 minus 4 is 3, which is still enough to clear that out and put 1 U.S. influence point in Egypt. Not enough to control it, but that's a nice change of pace. All right. That brings us to the top of turn 6. The Soviets get presidential directive, and they will use it. The Soviets may add 1 influence anywhere and may take an 8th action this round. Okay, so we'll put this up here so we don't forget. And they will add 1 influence wherever they feel like it. And where would that influence go? Here we go. It should go in Madagascar. They go from influence to control. But the U.S. might be able to get control of the Horn of Africa. Well, we'll see. Not much time left to do it. Bottom of turn 6. And 1 influence in Oman. Would that be bad? That would be great. And 1 other country in the Middle East. Man. All right. Well, it could be worse. Because I definitely don't want to use the Lion Falters. Okay, so using the Dhofar Rebellion, if the Soviets control South Yemen, because it automatically triggers because I'm using the 2 operational points, which they do, Add 1 Soviet influence in Oman, which is weird, but okay. And 1 other country in the Middle East. So obviously the appropriate thing to do there is add it to, since it's 1 other country in the Middle East, put influence in Yemen. Now the 2 points that the US gets to use, what was I going to do with them? Well, I'm kind of curious about how that scoring at the end of the game is going to go with that. I'm a little worried about the amount of points they're going to pick up. If you control VP's scoring card, VP's times 2 for the strategic sea lanes. Scoring card VP's times 2. I'm not even sure what that means. Let me check the rules. Oh, I see. You literally double your other scores. Wow, that's dangerous. They can't keep that. Okay, well, that explains what I need to do then. With those 2 points, we are going to do a realignment in the strategic sea lanes, since you can't do a coup there, because that doesn't make sense anyway. We'll do it twice, because it's 2 points. So both sides roll. Nobody's adjacent to it. The Soviets get a +1 because they have more control there. So nothing happens the first time. Second roll. Nothing happens the second time. Well, that was a complete waste of almost the last turn. So, top of the round 7, the Soviets, who are probably just going to win this at this point, with 3 points, ignoring the text. Man, that would have been nice. I never saw that card before either, Z-Big. They can't perform a coup in Ethiopia. They got 3 points. It's not enough to take away the US's influence there. They can't do a realignment, aka influence operations. So what can they do that's useful? They can do influence and take over Egypt. So since it requires 2 to take control, and there's 1 US in there, so I can't actually control it. If the player's influence is greater than or equal to the country's stability number, and the influence in the country exceeds their opponent's influence by at least that country's control Saudi Arabia, a player must have at least 3 influence in Saudi and 3 more influence than their opponent. So that means I would have to have 3 points of influence in Egypt, which I can do because I have 3 influence ops. So we'll use all 3 for that and take control of Egypt, which would normally be the end of the Soviets' turns, but they have 1 more to go thanks to the presidential directive. All right, so for the final US turn, things are not looking great. I don't have a 3 ops card to use, so we're going to have to do something else. Okay, so this is never going to get used. The line falters, I'll just discard it now. And we're going to use the late war, but Kenya's already under control. I don't know that it matters if I remove any of the non-controlled influences. So we're just going to use the 1 operational point and go for a coup in Somalia. Maybe? Yeah, Somalia. All right, so 1 plus, 3, a total of 3, which is sadly not even equal to 4. So that coup fails, which is kind of just how it's been going. And now the final Soviet extra turn, because of this card, our new extra card, is the Soyuz project. Advance 1 space on the space track. Well, they'll use that, thank you very much. That gives them 1 victory point, which drops the US down to a 1 there. And that will end the game, which also, by the way, as you move into the final turn, it gives, according to the thing, 1 more point in the space race to the AI, so they get 3 more victory points. So 1, 2, 3, and now the Soviets are ahead by 2 as we go into final scoring. Okay, going into final scoring, I just looked through all the deck to see, and you know, there's only 1 Africa scoring card and 1 Middle East scoring card. So it's possible to get through this entire game without either of these showing up and causing a mid-game scoring session. And you only do it at the very end. But here we are. So Africa, Presence. Everybody's got presence, so that balances out. Domination. No domination. Definitely not control, because you have to control all the battlegrounds. So that's kind of meh on that front. So nobody gets presence because it balances out. Well, to be more precise, because they have the strategic sea lanes, scoring card VPs times 2. So they both get presence, which balances out, but the Soviet presence is one larger because they have the strategic sea lanes, so they go up 1 victory point to a 3. Nobody has domination, nobody has control, and that concludes Africa's scoring. Over here in the Middle East, presence, both countries have presence for sure. Domination, nobody has domination, nobody has control. So +1 per controlled, oh yeah, that's also a thing. Forgot about that on this one. +1 per controlled battleground country in sea lane. Did I forget that or did I not forget that? No, I did forget that. +1 controlled battleground country in the region, because it would be +1 for both, but because they have the sea lanes, that gives the Soviets an extra 1, so that's +2. So it was on 2, but they get +1 for their presence for the strategic sea lanes, and another +1 for their control of battleground. Okay, so I guess that's why Red Sea is in the title, right? Middle East scoring, again, everybody's got presence, nobody has domination or control. Battlegrounds, the US controls 1, so that'd be a +1, but the Soviets also control 1, so that balances out, but they get double the victory points for controlling the strategic sea lanes. So where they had 1, they will get 2 points for their battleground country. And sadly, notice presence in this case is 3 points. So double that is actually 6 minus 3 from the US presence gives them another 3 points. 1, 2, 3. And that's that scoring. We already did the space scoring. The US gets Romanian autonomy, which is 1 point, so that brings it back down to a 7. They were equal in operations, so they just trade points there. And there you go. The AI wins round 2. Although at least I lost faster than I did in the first one, so that's something, right? So there you go. 2 games, 2 losses. And that's my first experience with Twilight Struggle, either Twilight Struggle, the classic version, or Conflict in the Red Sea, which according to the rules is pretty much the same game, just this one's a much smaller scale with that instant win condition for Somalia and Ethiopia. On the whole, I really like the game. I think it's pretty cool. Once you get the hang of it, it plays pretty fast. I like the instant win condition effect. That way you always kind of have to stay on your toes and keep fighting in that central region, which is like something like a game of Risk or something. You've got no motivation to do otherwise. So this way it keeps you in the fight and keeps it in the spirit of the historical events. Is it something I'd play solo all the time? No, it isn't. I think to some extent the solo play is actually a little too powerful if it gets the right combination of cards, since it gets to ignore the one thing that makes the Twilight Struggle game interesting, which is the giving your opponent something when you use the card yourself. It just gets to throw that out, which makes sense because it's just a piece of cardboard thinking, but sadly I lost both times to it. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching it. I had fun playing it. We got a lot more ahead on Tiny Table Games. I'm Ray, and thank you for watching.